Everybody, and welcome in to another video here. I am Ty, and today, like the title suggests, I'm going to be tier ranking the Black Sabbath discography. Found a pretty good tier maker that covers the entirety of Black Sabbath, including Heaven and Hell, and including the live albums as well. So this should be a fun one. I recently did a ranking 1 through 20 for all of them, but I figure I'm going to do a tier maker for this, kind of make it a little quicker, easier, and I'll maybe tell you my ranking, my number as I go through. So I'm trying to translate those numbers into the tiers here. I always find these fun and fascinating, especially with Sabbath, because this band has so many different eras and sounds. And, honestly, one of the only things that is throughout is Tony Iommi and his guitar playing. That's kind of the glue that holds the Sabbath train together, so to speak. So it's always fun. And to be honest with you, the fan base is always completely toxic about all these eras and these records, because you have obviously your Ozzy fans and the original lineup, and rightfully so. Then you have your Dio fans, rightfully so. And then you have us Tony Martin weirdos out there who defend that era. And rightfully so in my mind, too. So for me and my money, I'm going to be honest with you, I really only think there's really 2 or 3 bad albums, like actually bad, that I don't ever care to listen to ever again. I own all these albums in various different formats: vinyl, cassette, CD, but there's only like 3 I would say that are just like meh. The rest of them are either good to great to stellar to me. So that's where I stand. This will probably be controversial because of some of my rankings, but I'll give you a little bit of my history with Sabbath. So I was basically introduced to Sabbath proper in probably 99 or 2000, right around the time the Reunion live album came out that they released when they got back together, the original lineup with Ozzy. And that was basically the first time I was introduced to any of those classic era Sabbath tracks. My uncle had the cassette. I remember him playing that all the time down in the garage when it had come out, and I remember just enjoying the tracks, even as a 8, 9, 10-year-old, whatever, throughout those few years. And all those songs were in my life. And, obviously I knew Iron Man and Paranoid and stuff like that. You can't really avoid any of that stuff growing up, even today. And to be honest with you, I really didn't get into Sabbath for myself, other than like, oh, these are cool tracks. I'm enjoying what I'm hearing, until I really got into music, probably like 15, 16 years old, started getting disposable income, working, and the Dio Years compilation came out. And I remember when that happened, and I remember the kind of hype behind it, and them doing the interviews with Eddie Trunk on VH1 Classic when they officially reunited with Ronnie. And I remember just falling in love with a lot of those songs. And like, this really catches my ear. So that's where I really started discovering the band, especially starting with those few Dio albums, and then later Heaven and Hell. That's the only iteration I've seen Black Sabbath. I've seen Ozzy, but I never got to see the original line. Didn't see them on the farewell tour, the end tour, and didn't see them on any of the reunions or any Ozfest that I went to. Did see Ozzy, and saw Heaven and Hell twice, though. And I actually saw them on the last tour, the tour that they did before Ronnie passed, and ended up falling in love with that Heaven and Hell record, The Devil You Know, and just kind of went from there. And then I kind of dove backwards and went into the Ozzy albums and more, and really fell in love with a lot of those. And then when I got tired of those, I went to the Tony Martin stuff, and I fell in love with a lot of the Tony Martin stuff. I'm a big Tony Iommi guy. I think he's a mastermind. I think his riffing, his songwriting ability is second to none. Obviously, his tone is iconic, and helped form countless bands and countless genres of metal. So they're an iconic band. He's an iconic guitar player, and yeah, I'm just a big Tony fan. So honestly, like I was like, I need to hear more of this, and then I think Headless Cross was the first one I listened to. Absolutely love Headless Cross, which you'll later come to find out throughout the ranking, and just dove into the rest of it. And yeah, I basically love everything almost. So, but I'm gonna really pick apart some of this stuff. Might be controversial, but you have to. It's tier ranking. So, anyways, let's add this in here. So I found this good tier maker on tiermaker.com. So this has, like I said, all of the Ozzy stuff, the live albums, all the Tony Martin stuff, all the Dio stuff. So this will cover everything. Like I said, I basically own all of this in various different formats: CD, cassette, vinyl. So I have heard it all multiple times. If anything I haven't heard, I haven't heard some of these live albums, like this Cross Purposes live. I've never heard. I need to. I need to find it. I'm sure it's on YouTube. I don't own it. I think that's a VHS. I don't know if they did it on DVD. It was 90, probably like 94, 95. The album came out in 94, so it's probably like 95. I doubt it's on DVD. But anyway, I know there's a VHS, so there's probably a rip on YouTube. I need to watch that. I don't know if it ever got released on CD. Let me know. Comment down below. So anything I haven't heard, I won't rank, but it's probably, it's only going to be a few that I haven't heard. So let's start with Black Sabbath. Let's start with 1970. Let's start with the debut and work our way down. So this is going to be kind of controversial. I'm probably going to put it in C. And this is going to adjust through as we go, as I fill this out. But to me, I mean, the title track is tremendous. It's still a force 50 years later. I still love hearing that song. It's spooky. It's dark. It sets the tone for everything that's going to come for metal. Also, one of the greatest album covers of all time, for sure, to this day. That's a bucket list item to go there. You can still go there. That building is still up. The water mill, it's still up. You can still take pictures there. It's a bucket list for me. But like I said, title track's one of the best songs they ever wrote. This album has really great drums and bass. I mean, all the early Sabbath really showcases Bill and Geezer really well. I enjoy this record, but I think some of the blues stuff is still showing up too much. NIB, still a classic Sabbath song, still very, very heavy, way, way ahead of its time. The album's great. It's got some great playing. Obviously, Ozzy is at his freshest. I think Tony gets better as they go, especially in the earlier years, like the first 4 or 5 albums. But to me, it's heavily propped up by that title track and NIB. Like, those are the two standout tracks. I like The Wizard too. I always like that song, but I think it is heavily, heavily played out. Like, if you listen to Ozzy's Boneyard on Sirius XM, like, it's probably one of the most played Sabbath songs, and I have no idea why. It's a fun song, but it's not even close to the strongest song on that album. It is one of my standouts, but like I said, I think it's overplayed. So I'm going to put it at C4 now, the self-titled debut. So they followed it up in the same year with one of the best sophomore albums of all time. We did that on the channel, sophomore albums. Check that out. This was definitely on my list. Where is it? There you go. So we went from one of the best album covers to absolutely one of the worst. I'm going to put Paranoid in B. Oh, by the way, I had the self-titled at number 10, so right in the middle. And Paranoid I had at number 8. So I'm going to put it right above the debut. Paranoid, it's a big step above. It's definitely a step above the debut. It's heavier in every way. Great riffing, more soloing from Tony, which I love. It has the 3 most overplayed Black Sabbath songs on this album, but they're overplayed for a reason. Obviously, War Pigs, Paranoid, and Iron Man. It's just more solid playing throughout the band. They're still hitting on every note. Honestly, it's a very live production, which I like. I like the production on this record. It's a great balance between faster and slow-paced tunes. It's a good mix. Great lyrics by Geezer. A lot of them still resonate today with what's going on in the world today. My standouts are War Pigs. Still love War Pigs, even though it's completely overplayed. Hand of Dooms, one of the best tracks of early Sabbath, and Fairies Wear Boots are my three standouts. Paranoid comes in at number 8 and B on the tier ranking. It's, like I said, one of the worst album covers of all time. So they went from one of the best to absolutely one of the worst, which I find extremely funny. So let's go to Master of Reality, 1971. So only a year later and some change. To me, this is probably the most influential Sabbath record. I think I'm going to go S tier. Where did I have it? You know what? I'm going to put it in A tier. I had Master of Reality at number 5 on my ranking. To me, it's probably the most influential Sabbath record on metal as a whole. Many different subgenres spun off from this. Doom, stoner, a lot of that stuff sounds exactly the same. Bands made careers out of copying this record. There's a more crunchy guitar tone here from Tony. Bill is really good throughout. It's probably the best Bill album, I would say. Some nice different lyrical approaches from Geezer. We're touching on some different subjects, which I enjoy. It's a very, very heavy bass in the mix, which I love, and it covers a wide gamut of topics in the lyrics. Like I said, Geezer, it's a good standout Geezer and Bill album. It's a great album, deserves its praise. They stretch their wings a little bit here, and they form a lot of that early Sabbath sound that's really iconic. Solitude is a really cool song. It's kind of antithetical to like Sabbath as a whole, with a great vocal by Ozzy. Stellar on that track. My standouts are Sweet Leaf, Children of the Grave. That's my favorite Ozzy era Sabbath song. Obviously, the intro, those drums. Lord of This World, Into the Void, Orchid. Also a beautiful acoustic interlude. Tony Iommi was so good at doing that. It just added a different flavor to those early records. So I'm going to put Master Reality at A tier for now, and it came in at number 5 for me. So they followed that up with Volume 4 from 1972. So we're doing a lot of records. That's 4 albums in 2 years, basically. To me, this is the best production they had done at this point. I'm also going to tentatively put it in here at A. I put Volume 4 at 4 for me overall. It's the best production by the band at this point, I think. Ozzy sounds great. The band's very experimental on this record, but it's also pretty fairly straightforward. There's no kind of long meandering intros. They get to the point. Iommi has some great riffing, obviously. Bill is solid. Geezer turns in another great performance. And all this is from a band that's going off the rails already. Like they're coked out of their minds. But Tony captured a great guitar tone, like always. Those guys couldn't miss, especially in the early days. This is kind of the peak for me as far as Ozzy Sabbath. Definitely like Master Reality into Volume 4. Changes gets a lot of shit. I think it's a great ballad by a band that isn't exactly known for its ballads. So I understand why it gets its crap, but I still love Changes quite a bit. I think it's kind of overplayed, and it's kind of that Sabbath track that people who don't want to dig into the band, they know Changes, especially because Ozzy covered it and stuff. But so yeah, I like Changes enough. FX is a waste of a track, waste of time. Supernaut, one of the greatest Tony Iommi riffs of all time. Great tune. Volume 4, perfect combo of early Sabbath with the progginess that would come later. I think it's like the perfect pairing of those two, and one doesn't overwhelm the other. My standouts: Tomorrow's Dream, Changes, Supernaut, Snowblind, absolutely stellar track. Cornucopia, massive riff in Cornucopia, and Under the Sun, another stellar Tony riff. Great Tony album, Volume 4. Another great album cover. Too. Master Reality is okay. I know this is like the iconic Sabbath logo, so I'll give it props for that. It's kind of boring, but Volume 4, I love the color scheme, the black and gold, yellow, whatever, and Ozzy on there doing his best Nixon impression. So I like Volume 4 quite a bit. That's another iconic font too. Sabbath had many different logos, but these two are probably the most iconic. So yeah, I'll give it props there. So Volume 4 came in at number 4 for me. So let's go to Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, 1973. So what, we got the 5th album from the band in less than 5 years. It's like 3 years. It's crazy. Where is Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath? There it is. Absolutely killer album cover. Probably the best of the Ozzy era. If I put my money on it. This is a much more slim and raw production than Volume 4 to me. I do not like Tony's guitar tone as much, but he still comes up with some great riffs, obviously. He's the master at that. The progginess is really flowing on this record. And National Acrobat is a really proggy song. Like, you could tell they were listening to a lot of 70s prog at the time. Some of the heaviness is lost because of that. It isn't bad. It's just different. And the title track's obviously a classic. That's one of the classic Iommi riffs and just iconic. Fluff is a great little piece. Like I said, Iommi could do these acoustic little interludes so well. Sabrikdaba is another iconic Sabbath song with a great tune, dancey vibe to it, great riff. Rick Wakeman slays on this record, which adds to the progginess, obviously, from Rick Wakeman from Yes. Killing Yourself to Live, great Iommi showcase with a great solo throughout. That's in that song. And to me, that's probably the best song on the record. Who Are You is kind of meandering, pretty pointless track. I do think this album is pretty top heavy. I think the title track, Sabrikdaba, Killing Yourself to Live, are really the ones to go for here. I'm going to put, it might be controversial, I'm going to put Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath at C right now. Again, I'm not just ranking the Ozzy albums, I'm ranking the entire Sabbath. So I put Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath at number 9 for me. So let's move on to Sabotage. Sabotage came out in 75, so we had done 6 records in 5 years' time. That's insane. That output is crazy, especially when this band is coked out of their mind, and the label is trying to screw them. That's what a lot of this record is about. One of the worst album covers of Sabbath ever. They showed up to the shoot. They thought it was a test, so they just showed up wearing whatever, and this ended up the album cover. So yeah, Sabotage. Excuse me. We're back to the heavier, crunchy production, so I do enjoy that. Obviously, another great guitar tone. Hole in the Sky and Symptom of the Universe are massively heavy. They're probably heavier than anything on Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. They're great tracks, iconic Sabbath songs. Very angry on this record. Obviously, what was going on with the label, getting screwed out of a lot of money, royalties. Basically haven't made any money at this point. They were a giant band. Bill has some great fills on this record. And Ozzy sounds pissed and ferocious. It's a great Ozzy vocal. One of the most intense Ozzy Sabbath vocals, probably for me. Might be his best Sabbath performance ever. Just if you're counting just Sabbath, not Ozzy solo. The album has some filler. It's kind of an odd pace to it. Thrill of It All, Superstar, Czar, Am I Going Insane? Kind of weird pacing there throughout those songs. The back half is just kind of there. Sounds a lot like Bad Queen, which I'm not really into. I like this album, but honestly, the band is getting tired and it's showing. I'm definitely going to put it strongly in C tier. Actually, looking at that, I can move that up. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, I definitely like more. I like the debut, but it's like I said, it's only 2 tracks for me. So Sabotage is definitely firmly in C tier. I'll listen to it, but Hole in the Sky, Symptom of the Universe, and Megalomania, those are the standouts for me. And I put Sabotage at number 14 overall. And this is out of 20 studio albums. So, all right, Technical Ecstasy, 1976. They're following it up pretty well. We actually had a break there. So what? No, we actually it was a year, so we didn't even get a break yet. Technical Ecstasy. I don't mind the album cover. It's pretty chippy. Isn't it Signosis that did it? This is what I think what many kind of believe to be the downfall of the Ozzy era. Like, this is where it's kind of running its course. I don't hate it as much as some other people do. I don't think. I think it is a step up from Sabotage with less filler, but a slightly worse production. There's no more really crunchy guitar on this. Ozzy sounds pretty tame compared to Sabotage as well. Uh, Definitely a more funky record. So I understand if that turns people off, I get it. All Moving Parts has a really funk bass line and organs on it. So kind of stands out in terms of the Sabbath discography. It's a brighter album all around, leans more on 70s pop / disco vibe. Not calling it pop or disco, but I'm saying it definitely has that influence. I mean, It's All Right is basically a soft rock song. Bill does sound good on it. Bill sings it, but it's a soft rock song. I dig it. I dig it, though. On the whole, the album's fine. It's definitely in the bottom half of the Ozzy era albums, but not nearly the worst. My standouts are Gypsy, Rock and Roll Doctor, and Dirty Women. I'm going to put it at C here firmly. Honestly, Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy kind of intermingle there as far as where they're going to be ranked. I put Technical Ecstasy at 13, so one above Sabotage. So now we get to the last of the original lineup until we got 13. Never Say Die. Easily an F for me. It's one of my most hated albums. Not most hated albums of all time. It's definitely my most hated Sabbath album. It's easily number 20, the worst ranked album here by far. So yeah, this is 78, correct? Yeah, 78. So they got a little bit of a break, but Ozzy had already left. He came back and to redo a bunch of the vocals. Ozzy doesn't want to be there. They don't want Ozzy there. The band is drained. They're tired. It sucks. The production sucks. It's boring. The band sounds bored. They're just tired emotionally and physically. They're drained. It's such an uneven, weird album. I guess people kind of ironically like it. It's probably the most overrated Sabbath album by far. And I know a lot of people dislike it, but I say overrated because like that album cover and those pilot dudes are on all Sabbath t-shirts now. Like that Sabbath logo is one of the most iconic Sabbath logos now for whatever reason. So that probably album shows up more on Sabbath merch than any other album. I don't understand it. It's not even a good album cover. And it's a terrible album. It's just boring. The first 3 songs are probably the only redeemable tunes, but I don't care. The title tracks Never Say Die, Johnny Blade, and Junior's Eyes. The production is uneven from song to song. Like you're listening to the song and they play another song and you could tell like it was done completely differently. Like none of it flows together. I absolutely hate it. So Ozzy was gone. Ozzy went on to start his obviously massively successful solo career. Well, what are they going to do? What are the Sabbath guys going to do? They're drained. They're burnt out. They thought Ozzy was the problem. So they got rid of Ozzy. And they get Ronnie James Dio in the band. And the writing completely changes because Ronnie is actually an accomplished musician. No offense to Ozzy. Ronnie's actually a premier vocalist, can actually really sing. He's not just a front man. I know it's going to sound like I'm bashing on Ozzy, but I love Ronnie way more. And he's also an iconic frontman too. He's a great singer, great lyricist, can write music. So he's everything that Ozzy is not. So they drop Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell, one of the greatest album covers of all time, in my opinion. This is 1980. It's an S tier. It is my favorite Black Sabbath album. It comes in at number 1. So we went from my number 20 2 years later to my number 1. That's how much Ronnie meant to this band. It's such a heavy, dark record to me. I think from front to back, it's essential listening, man. It's heavy. It's dark. I don't really buy the argument that, it's Dungeons and Dragons of Sabbath. Um, Not really. Um, if you only know Ronnie from his solo stuff, like that's not really the way he wrote when he was in Sabbath. Um, I understand, or if you know him from Rainbow, I guess you can kind of accuse him of that, but yeah, I don't really accuse him of that even in Rainbow. It's more so his solo stuff where he got really mystical and stuff. But anyway, it's one of the best albums of all time. It's one of my favorite albums ever. Martin Birch's production is amazing. That's what it really puts it over the top for me too. That dude's a genius. I think it's the best guitar, bass, and drum tone the original three ever got on a record. Tony's production was pretty tired by the end. Tony Iommi. So getting somebody from outside was a great move. And you bring in Martin Birch, who had a string of great albums, obviously, in the 70s. So you bring him in and you're off to the races. Features some of the greatest and most iconic Sabbath songs for me. It rivals the very best of the Ozzy era. The most inspired the band have sounded to me since Volume 4. It was obviously very helpful that Ronnie was actually a musician who could bring his own ideas to the table. And it wasn't just Tony and Geezer who had to do everything and pick up all the pieces. Bill sounds great on it, which is pretty amazing, considering the state that Bill was in, and he doesn't even remember really recording this album. My standouts on the entire thing. It's must listen to for any fan of heavy metal by far. So we get the follow up, Mob Rules. How do you follow up the masterpiece? You know, can you do it again? A year later, Mob Rules comes out, 1981. We lose Bill Ward, but we get Vinny Appice in the band. A stellar drummer in his own right, hits the skins really hard, sounds just like a hammer pounding away. Another great album cover. It's S tier to me. It's my second favorite Black Sabbath album. Mob Rules is a very close second, actually, and it's crept up throughout the years. It's a logical progression to me from Heaven and Hell. It's darker, meaner, heavier, features plenty more classic tunes that rival, like I said, any of the Ozzy era Sabbath tunes. Sign of a Southern Cross. I mean, Mob Rules, the title track, Falling Off the Edge of the World. Like, dude, that stellar. Another great production from Martin Birch. Vinny does a great job. Like I said, he fits in really well. And obviously, Ronnie would go on to use him throughout his career on many, many classic albums. But the entire album is essential. Those are my S tier Sabbath albums so far. Kind of looking at this too. I think Volume 4 I did a little dirty. It is my favorite, my highest ranked Ozzy era album, so I think I'll put that in S tier for right now too. Alrighty, moving on. So what do we get? We got two stellar albums. We're gonna get a live album. I'm gonna do the live albums last here. But we get a live album, Live Evil, which basically broke up the band, a lot of egos, and Ronnie was gone. So Tony and the guys are left to pick up the pieces yet again. And what do we get? We get 1983's Born Again with Ian Gillan from Deep Purple. I'm going to put Born Again at number 18. Now, I'm going to put it at C. That's very low, but it does not deserve to be on the same tier as Never Say Die. Born Again is a pretty weird album. Honestly, and I know some people absolutely hate it. I know some people absolutely love it. The record is very interesting. It's worth listening to. Ian Gillan is obviously a legend. I think he's the least fitting Sabbath singer. Like, I think he fits the band the least out of any guy they ever had fronting the band. Lyrically, stylistically, it's just a different vibe. So the album comes off as a clashing kind of two worlds. Obviously, you have a mesh of Deep Purple and Sabbath, and you're thinking, oh, there's nothing can go wrong here. But I just don't think it mixes very well. Disturbing the Priest, Zero the Hero, I really like those songs. I think there are a couple of really great Sabbath tracks, really good Tony Iommi riffing on those. I think the weird, muddy, uneven production really brings this album down. Definitely needs a stellar remix. Ultimately, I don't think Ian Gillan was a great fit. Even though he sounds fine, It's just weird. Like he doesn't fit the band, and his lyrics come off kind of forced. Um, and Tony is an entirely different player than Richie Blackmore. Different feel, different tone, different riffing style, different abilities. Richie's great, obviously, but I just don't think they meshed as well as Ian and Richie. Some of the songs are dumb, like Digital Bitch is a dumb song, annoying. So my standouts are Disturbing, The Priest, Zero the Hero. The title track's pretty cool as well. The album cover, I know some people have grown to love it. I still think it's pretty bad. But it's definitely iconic. It's an iconic image in Black Sabbath history. I'll give it that. So Ian Gillan, gone. So we're going from lead singer to lead singer to lead singer, which is never good. So 1986, Tony's sitting around and Tony says, I want to do a solo album. The label says, no, we need you to do a Black Sabbath album. That's what's going to sell and, fill out this contract. So you're going to do a Black Sabbath album. So he dropped Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi, 7-star in 1986. I had Born Again at 18. I have 7-star at 17. You can honestly flop those anytime. I think 7-star is a pretty cool record. It's just kind of a weird Sabbath record. It's not very heavy. It's more bluesy, hard rock based. Tony brings in Glenn Hughes. So he went from one Deep Purple singer to another, which is interesting. But Tony has some great solos and a great feel on this record. I really enjoy it. Does explore kind of a different side of his ability. Glenn is obviously great. Like the dude could do no wrong still to this day. It's hard to rank this just because of its weird history and the fact that it's not really supposed to be a Sabbath album and it's very intentionally different than anything that has come before it or even after it. You can kind of tell, though, it's a precursor to what he was going to do with Tony Martin. It's just not fully realized yet. Title track is killer. In for the Kill is also really good. No Stranger Love is a pretty solid ballad. It's pretty good, like mid-'80s production. It's what you hear. I like 80s production, so it's definitely better than Born Again in that production regard. Danger Zone is also pretty cool. Heart Like a Wheel is a really great vocal and some good guitar work. So In for the Kill, the title track, No Stranger Love, and Danger Zone are my standouts. I'm going to put it in the C tier. I have it at 17. Again, I anything above, F tier is stuff that I will listen to and I don't absolutely hate. So I'm going to put it at 17. And I'm going to put it in C tier for now. So next up, Tony wanted to do the solo album and turn it into a Black Sabbath album. So kind of Black Sabbath back together, sort of. And Glenn Hughes basically goes off the rails on the tour. And what do you do on the next album? You got to bring somebody else in. So let's bring in another singer. Let's bring in Tony Martin to do The Eternal Idol in 1987. And this is a pretty interesting record. Tony Martin didn't write anything on this because basically the entire record was written before he came in. And a pretty cool album cover. Interesting. I'll give it that. I put it at number 11 in my ranking. So it's going to be another C tier for me. I really dig the album. It's a nice, clean 80s production. I like 80s productions. It's competent playing from everybody involved. Bob Daisley is in the band. Eric Singer plays on this on drums. They're both good. This is the first Tony Martin album. He slays. He's absolutely killer vocalist. One of my favorite Sabbath vocalists. I'd probably put him just below Ronnie and above Ozzy, honestly. He's such a talented singer, extremely underrated dude as far as songwriter and vocal ability. The album, like I said, was already written before he joined, so I feel like the next couple Martin albums really outshine this one, but it's still fine. Like The Shining is such a cool song. Ancient Warrior, dude, those are classic Sabbath songs with great riffs. Like I don't understand why. I understand why people don't like this era because it's so different and it's very 80s. But you cannot sit there and say that there's not good soloing, not good guitar playing, and not good riffing on these albums, man. Tony slays on a lot of these Tony Martin albums. Absolutely slays. Like I said, The Shining, Ancient Warrior, classic Sabbath tunes. Those songs would have been cool to hear outside. Like, honestly, to hear Ronnie do them. I don't think Ozzy could really do them, but would have been interesting. They're classic Sabbath tunes to me. I do enjoy this album quite a bit. The middle gets a little very samey. The title track is a nice, good slab of like classic Sabbath riffing and vibes. Title track is really cool. So the standouts for me are The Shining, Ancient Warrior, and the title track, Eternal Idol. And it comes in at the C tier, and it was number number 11 for me. So basically right in the middle. If you're going to put these here, you're probably going to do not that. You're probably going to do like that. So we got some stability now. Tony Martin's still in the band, and we got a different label. Eternal Idol was the last record they need to satisfy the contract with Warner Bros. And we're going to move to IRS Records, which would later be the bane of a lot of Sabbath fans' a lot of Tony Martin era fans' existence, because that label is now defunct, and a lot of that stuff was out of print, still is out of print, even though now Tony Iommi has the masters and the rights to everything. We still haven't gotten those Tony Martin reissues or anything yet, so we'll see. Eternal Idol did, but that was one of the Warner albums. So, Headless Cross, 1989. Really cool album cover. I dig it. I'm going to put Headless Cross. I got to put one of these Tony Martin albums up here for me, and I'm going to put it in S tier. It's my number 3 all-time favorite Sabbath album, man. We get Cozy Powell in the band, who is absolutely stellar. I think he's probably, might be blasphemous, the best Black Sabbath drummer ever. Cozy Powell absolutely kills it on everything he ever did, and this album is no different. It's the first album with Tony Martin actually writing the lyrics, so it's pretty overly like satanic. He kind of went into that, this is Black Sabbath, I gotta write really satanic, evil stuff, but I love every second of it. The drums and bass on this record are excellent. Cozy Powell is the most talented drummer that Sabbath ever had. Like I said, Iommi shreds on this album, absolutely kills it. Some great soloing and riffs throughout this whole thing. It is one of the best Sabbath records ever. You heard it here first, and it is strong from beginning to end. I put this record on. I listened to it all the way through. It needs a reissue badly, man. The only way to really easily listen to it is on YouTube. There's a nice, I think maybe 1080p, if I remember right, YouTube rip. I do have it on CD. Used to have it on vinyl. And that was one of the ones I sold off and absolutely regret. Hopefully someday we get those reissues from Tony Iommi with some cool demos or maybe some live stuff. Just give us anything. I'm begging you. Even if it's just Headless Cross that we get, I'd actually be stoked. It's very 80s production, so I understand if people don't like it. I love it. Tony Martin is such a talent, man. Just an underrated dude. The title track, Devil and Daughter, good song. When Death Calls, Kill in the Spirit World. Brian May plays on this record. I believe it's When Death Calls. He has a solo on, if I remember right. Great album, S tier album, and one of my favorite Black Sabbath albums. Comes in at number 3 on my all-time ranking. So we're going to get into the 90s, and Tony Martin's still in the band, so that's good. No crazy lineup changes, and we get a different vibe here. We get Tear from Black Sabbath. An okay album cover. Okay. 1990. I put Tear at number 7. I'm going to put it right here at B tier. I feel that's a solid spot for it. I like Tear quite a bit, but it's definitely a step below Headless Cross for me, but it's definitely above Eternal Idol as far as these early Tony Martin era albums. So what about Tear? Another great Tony Martin album. He sounds stellar. It's slightly less great than Headless Cross, like I said, but it's still really good. Tony's awesome on it. Slays, great solos, riffing, obviously. He really becomes a shredder in this era, which I love. It's a different side of him. Cozy, once again, crushes it. The production is a little more raw, I think, than the previous Tony Martin albums, and it gets kind of a 90s feel, which I dig. I like the fact that lyrically, Tony Martin went in a different direction here than Headless Cross. Sabbath Stones is a great epic tune, man. This album is, like I said, really great, but it falls off a little at the end, which kind of holds it back. Feels good to me, and Heaven and Black are kind of holding it back. Like, those tracks are just fine. My standouts, Anno Mundi, really cool. The Lawmaker, Jerusalem, and the Sabbath Stone. Sabbath Stone's probably my favorite song on there. Really epic track. So they did Tear, and obviously business isn't great. Black Sabbath, the classic lineup is basically gone at this point. So what do? You bring back one of your iconic vocalists. So 1992, we get Dehumanizer. Ronnie was back in the band. Geezer was back in the band as well, which is very cool. And we get another classic Sabbath record, man. To me, this is kind of their painkiller. It's very heavy. The Mob Rules lineup is back, and they're going to kill it. It's a very heavy record. Like I said, it's kind of like Painkiller to me. Not as fast, but just heavy and dark. It's a really great album. It's very different than the previous Ronnie albums and even the Tony Martin albums. It's a very heavy album in playing and production. It's much more raw than what the band had released in years prior. But it sounds great. Ultimately, I think it's a pretty great cohesive album, like front to back. Really flows well. Ronnie is amazing on it always. Tony has some great riffing on it. I is one of the best Sabbath riffs that Tony ever wrote. Vinny and Geezer fit right back in nicely, obviously. The album has some great fast songs, some nice mid-tempo, slower songs like After All the Dead and The album is a little long. That's what kind of holds it back for me. But that is my only real nitpick. It would have been interesting to see what the approach would have been if this would have kept going, or if they would have did a proper follow-up to Mob Rules. Because I doubt it would have sounded like this, because this has a 90s feel to it. But I like this record quite a bit. I put it at number 6, and it's going to be in the A tier for me. After All the Dead, Master of Insanity, Time Machine, and I are my standout tracks. And like I said, I put it at number 6, and it falls squarely in the A tier. So the lineup implodes again. Vinny and Ronnie leave the band. Ronnie would end up leaving at the end of the tour because they wanted to open for Ozzy, and Ronnie would never do that. So he said, "Peace, I'm out." They actually did some shows with Rob Halford. Rob asked Ronnie if it was cool, and Ronnie gave him his blessing. And so yeah, those shows are out there. Really interesting seeing Rob Halford front Sabbath. Kind of a peek into what might have been if he would have been chosen throughout the gamut of spin the wheel singers for Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi. But what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go back to the well, and we're going to call our old buddy Tony Martin, and we're going to go release Cross Purposes in 1994. I really like Cross Purposes. It's definitely a C tier album for me, though. I put it at number 12 for me, so you could honestly might be able to move it to B tier. And again, I've really got to pick these albums apart. We're ranking 20 studio albums here, guys. So Cross Purposes, it's definitely an early mid-90s production. A little bit alternative and grunge kind of show in there. Virtual Death kind of has a Seattle vibe. It's fine. I don't hate it. Like probably most purists do. All in all, I think it's a pretty just solid record. Good riffing and playing from Tony. Tony Martin sounds great as always. Bobby Rondinelli is solid. So no Cozy Powell, obviously, but he's still good. It's nice to have Geezer back too, and he's on an album with Tony Martin, which is the only one that ever happened, which is pretty cool. This album has a few really classic Sabbath tunes, though. I think Cross of Thorns is awesome with a great heavy riff. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle is also a really cool song about a true story. So it's really dark lyrics. Cardinal Sin is really cool. Great riff on that. Evil Eye is a really cool song with Eddie Van Halen actually soloing on it. So which is cool as well. Standouts for me: Cross of Thorns, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Cardinal Sin, and Evil Eye. And again, I put it at number 12, and it's going to rank at in C tier for me. This could creep up as I listen to it. This is the Tony Martin album that I have the least familiarity with. So as I listen to Cross Purposes throughout the years, it could prop up. Funny part about this album cover is it showed up, or this was, I don't remember which came first, but it's the same picture as the Send Me an Angel Scorpion single, which is interesting. And so it's just fine. The album cover's fine. Dehumanizer, though, really cool album cover. Didn't talk about that one. So how do we follow that up? Well, we're running towards the end of the IRS years as far as the label goes, and we're running towards the end of that contract. So the band needed to satisfy the contract. So we got Forbidden. Cool album cover. I dig it. That's my kind of niceness towards this album. So Forbidden came out in 95. I put Forbidden at number 19. So it's right above Never Say Die for me. It's another one of my most hated Black Sabbath albums that I would never really want to listen to ever again, and don't really plan to for anything. Production on this record is ass. Anybody who knows anything about this era and this album knows that. I mean, Ernie C produced it because the labels told Tony to use Ernie C, who works with Ice-T. So there you go. That tells you a lot right there. Obviously, this dude, I mean, I know Ice-T loves hard rock and metal and stuff, but Ernie C is not a hard rock or metal producer. And even in the 90s, he couldn't even really get a 90s sound for Black Sabbath. Cozy's back in the band, so it's nice to have him back on drums, but it's basically for nothing. There's quotes from Iommi where Ernie C was telling Cozy how to drum, and like, oh, we want this hip hop fill in here, and that's, you just don't tell Cozy Powell how to drum. That's a mistake. Neil Murray returns on bass because Geezer basically wanted nothing to do with this. He kind of saw the writing on the wall. It's just a boring album, man. There's not a lot of memorable riffs or solos. It's pretty uninspired. They just needed this to get out of the record deal. And even Tony Martin says that. And it sucks. This album didn't get a fair shake because of that. There are some redeemable parts, like Can't Get Close Enough is a decent tune. Tony Martin still sounds excellent, even through the ass production. So it really is a shame that this was his final Sabbath album. He had to go out like this. Guilty as Hell is pretty okay. It's got a nice main riff through it. This album has ideas, but it's just bad execution and bad production, which drag it way down the list to 19. My standouts: Can't Get Close Enough, Guilty as Hell. Rusty Angels is, I mean, it's a terrible title, but it's still a decent tune. It's got a weird 90s kind of alternative vibe. The title track is okay. I guess if you're going to pick some to listen to, I guess I would start there. But again, a lot of this IRS era stuff is completely unavailable on streaming. It all is. You can listen to it on YouTube. I own it all on CD. Hopefully we get represses of this. Hopefully, I mean, the Forbidden remix has said to have been done for a while. Tony's just looking for the time to put it out, which I don't really understand. Like, you already did the work. Let's put it out. Let's recoup some of that cost. People will buy this. It's not going to be a massive seller, but people will be interested to hear what Tony Iommi originally wanted to do with this record and see if it could turn into anything halfway redeemable. So I want some of this stuff to get re-released. Obviously, I need it. So we get a lot of nothing. They basically did this album to satisfy the label, and then they already started in talks with Sharon to do the Ozzy reunion with the classic lineup. So it's kind of a dead duck, just kind of out there on the vine. Never got its fair shake. They do, like I said, do Reunion. Let's go ahead and just rank Reunion now. I'm going to put Reunion solidly in A tier. I think it's probably the best. There's not that many Ozzy era Sabbath, at least proper band approved Sabbath era live albums, classic Sabbath era live albums, and Reunion's one of them. Just came out on vinyl. I did an unboxing of it on the channel. It's a great album. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, so that's probably why I rank it so high. Live Evil, I'm also going to put it A. I know the production on it's weird. They just did a remix for it in the box set, so that kind of changes it up a little bit. But I dig it. I like Ronnie singing those Ozzy songs that he does, and I like hearing all these classic songs from these two amazing albums. So I'll put that solidly at A tier. The End, I've never heard this. I think that's the EP that they did, the tour EP. Um, and this is this is at Hammersmith Odeon, absolutely stellar. Neon Nights, I'll put this at B tier. This is a much better set. This is the reunion era with Heaven and Hell with Ronnie. This is at Wacken, if I believe. I don't remember if it's one show. I'll put it solidly at B tier from what I remember. That's it. Live at Last. I'm not even gonna rank Live at Last. Past Lives. Um, this is pretty good too. I'll put this at B tier as well. So that's it as far as the live albums that I've listened to. I need to listen to this. I'm actually really curious, and I don't know why I never have. So we get a lot of nothing, and they do the Ozzy reunions off and on. They do Ozfest with Black Sabbath, and not a lot of studio output. So we're kind of just sitting around. The aforementioned, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Dio years drops, and they do a couple songs for it that have never been. They do a couple kind of singles for it that had never been recorded before, and they're stellar. And the magic is back. Ronnie's back. Vinny's back. Geezer and Tony. So that Mob Rules lineup is hitting on all cylinders again. And they go, well, why don't we just turn this into an album? And we got in 2009. So basically, 14 years after Forbidden, we got Heaven and Hell. They couldn't call it Black Sabbath because of Sharon, but we got the Heaven and Hell, their only solo album under that, or only album under that name, excuse me, The Devil You Know in 2009. Devil You Know, I put it solidly at 15. I think it straddles the line between C and B tier for me. If this was 2010, I would definitely probably put this in A or B tier for sure. I'm going to put it in C tier for right now. I dig this album still. I think it's overly long, and I don't like the production on it. It just kind of sounds like that 2009 production that a lot of albums sound like. It's pretty thick, heavy bass. Geezer is great throughout it. Like I said, I love this album a ton when it came out, but my nostalgia for it has kind of fallen off, and I think it's kind of overly long. It is very samey throughout too. It's kind of mostly the same tempo, which a lot of the latter era Dio albums suffer from the same thing. So the playing is excellent on it. Tony is great. Ronnie sounds great. Vinny's solid again. But yeah, it just kind of is there. I think the runtime and the same sameness bring it down. It's still a good listen though. If you've never heard it, I suggest it, especially if you like the Ronnie stuff. The production is very typical of the time, like I said, which I don't like. It depends on where you're coming from. It could be good or bad depending on your ears. Bible Black is a really cool song. Turn of the Screw, Eating the Cannibals, Follow the Tears. Awesome opening riff and keys on Follow the Tears. So those are my standouts. I'm going to put it solidly at C tier, and it comes in at 15 for me. Last but not least, we finally get the Ozzy Reunion album. 13 came out in 2013. And again, I think I like this album a lot more when it came out. I'm going to put it at C tier as well. I think it's fine. It's just kind of there. The band tries to capture that old formula, and they don't really ever get there, though. It just kind of sounds like they're just trying to sound like Black Sabbath, and it kind of just goes by in a blur. It's not really bad. It's just there, which is probably the worst comment you can ever give about an album. Tony's obviously still Tony. He's amazing. Geezer's still amazing. Ozzy sounds good. I mean, obviously the studio is helping him out here, but he sounds fine. Bill isn't on this, but Brad Wilkes from Rage Against the Machine does his best Bill Ward impression. It's fine. The production is ass, man. Now, this and Forbidden are the two worst produced Sabbath records by far. And Never Say Die. Like Rick Rubin should not produce metal bands anymore. Like this and Death Magnetic are some of the worst production jobs ever, in my money. Everything's just loud. There's no dynamic to it at all. It's too long. 76 minutes is way too long. I do enjoy some of the tracks. End of the beginning, God is Dead, but it just suffers from that sameness that I talked about with the Devil You Know. Yeah, it's cool to have a Sabbath album with Geezer lyrics on it again because it's been so many years. But it just feels like they're trying to capture magic that's gone, and they didn't really make what they wanted to make. They just made what everybody thought they should make, and what Rick Rubin thought they should make. So that's kind of my biggest gripe against it. Like I said, End of the Beginning, God is Dead, Zeitgeist is a pretty cool song too. So yeah, I'm gonna put it solidly in C tier. So that's it, guys. I'm not gonna rank these because I don't know enough about these. I think I'm pretty happy with this, honestly. I mean, maybe some of these could move up to B tier. I probably the only thing I'd move up to B tier would maybe be the debut. Yeah, I put the debut at 10. I think let's move the debut up to B tier. That's a solid C tier for me. S tier is definitely solid. Those are my favorite Sabbath records, and we have all the eras pretty much represented. A tier is really solid too. 3 live albums in the A tier, which is funny. But yeah, I think Master Reality and Dehumanizer are definitely A tier albums. Paranoid might move up to A tier. I just think I'm tired of it. Honestly. Let's move Paranoid up to A tier. Let's do that. And yeah, guys, that's gonna be it. That's gonna be it. Let's lock it in there. If you enjoy this type of stuff, I want to do more of this. Hit the like button, subscribe. We're nearing 100 subs. I'd like to get there before the end of the year. We'd appreciate you hanging out. We do this type of stuff: vinyl unboxings, record hauls, record store hauls, stuff like that. We do a podcast basically weekly where me and my buddy Tyler do a specific music related topic or vinyl related topic and talk about that for an hour or two every week. So stick around with us, guys. We'd appreciate it. Comment down below. Do you hate this ranking? Is Tony Martin the best Sabbath frontman of all time? Is Ronnie? Are you an Ozzy stan? Let me know. Let me know down in the comments section below. Sound off down there. And until next time, guys, peace.